A Viet Cong fighter in the brush across the rice paddy had a way of dealing with American rifle fire. The M16 rifle could only reach so far, and its rounds went where you pointed them in a flat, straight line. A man behind a tree, in a foxhole, around the corner of a dike, was a man the rifles could not really touch. He could fire a few rounds and duck back, and the Americans across the field could shoot at his tree all afternoon and never put a bullet on him. Then one of the Americans across the field opened his rifle squad special weapon, a stubby thing that looked like a sawed-off shotgun with a fat barrel, dropped a small fat round the size of a beer can into the breech, snapped it shut, and lifted it to his shoulder at an angle. The weapon made a hollow sound, a deep, soft thump, like nothing else in the war. A fat grenade arced up out of the barrel, climbed in a slow, lazy curve over the rice paddy, came down behind the tree and exploded. The man behind the tree was no longer behind anything. The cover that had stopped the rifles had not stopped the grenade that fell on him from above. A single American soldier, with a single shot, had reached around the side of the world and killed him. The Americans called the weapon the Thumper. They called it the Blooper, the Bloop Tube, the Cannon. The Australians, who carried one, called it the Wombat Gun. Its real name was the M79, and it gave the average rifle squad something it had never had before. A small piece of artillery one man could carry on a sling. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. The thing that made the M79 so dangerous was not the size of its explosion. It was the gap that it filled. For most of the history of infantry combat, a foot soldier had two ways to reach an enemy. He had his rifle, which fired flat and accurate out to a few hundred yards, but could only hit what it could see and could not get around cover. And he had a hand grenade, which he could throw maybe 40 or 50 yards if he was strong and the ground was level, but which mostly traveled 20 or 30 in a real fight. In between those two distances was a long, ugly stretch of ground, too far for a grenade, too close, or too hidden for a rifle. An enemy in that stretch, behind a tree or in a hole, was a problem nothing in a rifleman's pack could solve. The American answer for a long time had been a rifle grenade, an explosive device fitted over the muzzle of a rifle and launched by firing a special blank round. It worked after fashion. The recoil was punishing. The accuracy was poor. Once you put a rifle grenade on the muzzle, you could not fire ordinary bullets without taking it off. Most riflemen hated them. The other option was a mortar, a small tube that lobbed shells in a high arc over cover. Mortars were powerful and accurate in the hands of a trained crew, but they were heavy. A mortar was a crew weapon, set up in a fixed spot, taking time to deploy and aim. A rifle squad pinned down in front of a tree lean could not just call up a mortar the way a man might pull a pistol out of a holster. What the Army wanted was something in between, a weapon a single soldier could carry with him, that fired an explosive round farther than he could throw it, faster than a mortar crew could set up, more accurate than a rifle grenade. The program that produced it was called Project Niblick. The engineers settled on a 40 millimeters round, a fat cartridge a little longer than a pack of cigarettes, with a grenade as a projectile. They tried to build a launcher that could fire several of them in succession, like a revolver, but the multi-shot designs would not work well enough. So the Army settled on a simpler answer. A single-shot launcher, broken open like a shotgun, loaded one round at a time, fired from the shoulder. The Army adopted the M79 on the 15th of December, 1960. The first ones reached troops in 1961, and by the middle of the decade there was an M79 grenadier in nearly every American rifle squad in Vietnam. The way the Army organized that grenadier said a lot about how seriously the weapon was taken. By 1965, the M79 was riding into combat with the big divisions that did the early heavy fighting, the 1st Cavalry Division, the 1st Infantry Division, the 101st Airborne, and the 173rd Airborne Brigade among them. An Army rifle squad of that era was usually built around two small fire teams of 4 or 5 men each, and each fire team got its own grenadier carrying an M79. That meant 2 of those launchers in every rifle squad, with a single grenadier in the smaller Marine squad. The man behind the Thumper was not an attachment from somewhere else, brought up for special jobs. He was sewn into the structure of the squad, walking with a rifleman every step of every patrol, and the men around him learned to fight in a way that took his weapon into account. Some grenadiers went further. To make the launcher even handier in the dense jungle, they cut down the wooden buttstock to a pistol grip and trimmed the barrel back, turning the M79 into a stubby, sawed-off weapon they could swing through brush or carry slung at the hip. It was not regulation, but a squad's first sergeant could often be persuaded that what worked in the field worked. The weapon itself was almost laughably simple. It looked like a stubby, fat-barreled shotgun. There were only a few real parts to it. A receiver, a single 40mm barrel, a wooden forend, a wooden buttstock, and a folding ladder sight for setting the range. To load it, the grenadier pushed a small lever to the right, broke the barrel open at a hinge, dropped a round in, and snapped it shut. To fire, he set the sight to the distance he wanted to reach, pointed the launcher up at the right angle, and pulled the trigger. The whole thing weighed about 6.5 pounds empty, less than a loaded rifle, and a man could carry it all day without much trouble. The sound it made on firing was the thing that gave it its name. The 40mm round was launched with a low-pressure charge, not a sharp rifle crack, but a hollow, soft thump, almost a comic noise in the middle of a firefight. Different soldiers heard it differently. To some it was a thump, so they called the weapon the Thumper. To others it was a bloop, so it was the Blooper, the Bloop Tube, whatever a man called it. The sound was unmistakable in the field, and the men on the receiving end learned to recognize it too. The hollow thump from across the paddy was the sound of a grenade already in the air, looking for a place to come down. What it threw out of that barrel was where the danger lived. The standard round was a high-explosive grenade, a small fat shell that contained enough explosive to throw out roughly 300 fragments when it went off. A skilled grenadier could put one of those rounds onto a man-sized target at well over 100 meters, and could reach out to about 350 meters at the weapon's maximum range. He could drop it behind trees, into foxholes, over dikes, into the mouths of bunkers, into the windows of buildings. Anywhere a rifle bullet could not go, the grenade could. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. The 40mm round was rifled in flight, spinning as it traveled, and the rotation was what armed the fuse. The grenade did not become live until it spun enough times to wake up the firing mechanism, which meant it would not explode for the first 10 meters or so of its flight. That was meant to protect the grenadier from his own weapon, but it also meant the M79 was useless at very close range, a problem that would matter when an enemy got inside that arming distance and the grenadier was suddenly holding a weapon that could not fight him. The high-explosive round was the workhorse, but the M79 could fire other things, and that variety was part of what made it so feared. There was a buckshot round, a 40mm shotgun shell holding 20 to 27 heavy steel pellets, which turned the weapon into a giant shotgun for close-in work. There was a flechette round, a canister packed with about 45 small steel darts, which sprayed out in a lethal cone like a handheld shotgun blast of nails. There were smoke rounds and white phosphorus rounds, illumination rounds that lit up a patch of ground, and tear gas rounds for clearing tunnels. One man with an M79 and a pouch of mixed ammunition could put high explosive, fire, smoke, and a wall of flying steel onto a target as the situation changed. He carried a whole supporting arm on his shoulder. The way the weapon was used is what turned it from a clever gadget into a thing the Viet Cong dreaded. The grenadier was a fixed position in the rifle squad. Every squad had one, sometimes two. When the squad walked into an ambush or hit a bunker, when a sniper opened up from a tree lean, when a machine gun pinned the men in a paddy, the call went out for the M79 man. He moved up, set himself, judged the range and the wind, lifted the launcher to the right angle, and started feeding grenades onto the problem. He could fire about 5 or 6 aimed rounds a minute, which sounds slow until you realize that each round was the explosive equivalent of a small artillery shell going off in a 5-meter circle around whatever the grenadier put it on. He was, in the words American sergeants used, the platoon leader's artillery. A platoon could not call down a real artillery battery for a sniper across a paddy or 2 men in a hedgerow. The wait was too long, the rounds too big, the risk to nearby friendlies too high. The M79 closed the gap. The grenadier could put high explosive onto a small target in seconds, not minutes, and he could do it from inside the squad's own line. For a Viet Cong fighter, that was a new and ugly fact of the war. The cover he had been using all his life, the dikes and the brush and the spider holes and the foxholes scratched into a trilene, was cover against bullets. The M79 was not bullets. The grenade came down out of the sky like a small mortar shell, and the cover that stopped the rifles only made the explosion better, walling the blast and the fragments. A man behind a wall of earth might be safe from an M16. He was not safe from an M79 round dropping into the hole he was hiding in. The weapon's reach was its psychology. A grenadier who could see you, even a hint of you, even a muzzle flash of your weapon firing back at the squad, could often reach you. The Viet Cong learned that opening fire on an American patrol from a trilene at 200 meters did not buy them the safety the range used to. The thump came across the field, and a few seconds later a grenade was finding its way into their position. They had to displace fast or stay and die. The M79 took away the kind of standoff shooting that had been their bread and butter. The Viet Cong learned the rest of the lesson the way good ambushers always do. They learned to spot the grenadier in an American patrol and to kill him first. The man with the M79 was easy to pick out, the stubby fat barrel launcher on a sling instead of rifle, the heavy bandolier grenades across his chest, the way he moved a half-step behind the rifleman and a half-step ready to set himself. Once an ambush started, the enemy's best machine gunners and snipers worked on dropping the grenadier before anything else, because killing him collapsed the squad's reach back into rifle range, where the cover the ambushers were using actually worked again. The grenadier in Vietnam often walked into a firefight already at the top of the enemy's list. A lot of the men who carried the thumper carried it as their second or third weapon of the war, because the one before them had been hit. It had real limits, and the men who carried it knew them well. The single-shot loading was slow. After every round, the grenadier had to break the weapon open, pull out the empty case, push in a new round, and snap it closed. In a fast-moving close fight, that was a long time. The minimum arming distance meant the M79 was nearly useless within 10 meters of the grenadier, exactly where things sometimes got their worst. Many grenadiers carried a launcher as their only long arm, with only a .45 pistol on their hip as a backup, and a man with a pistol against a man with an AK-47 at close range was a man with a problem. Later in the war, some grenadiers also slung a rifle to cover the gap, but the choice was always there. You had artillery on your shoulder and almost nothing else. The Army eventually answered those problems with a different kind of weapon. The M203 grenade launcher, which appeared late in Vietnam and replaced the M79 in the years after, was a smaller version of the same 40mm tube clipped under the barrel of an M16 rifle. The same grenade, the same range, but now the grenadier had a full automatic rifle right above his launcher. He no longer had to choose. The M79 went away from the frontline American squad, kept on for special uses by some units, retired by most. But while it lasted, while the Thumper and the Blooper and the Wombat Gun were the standard tool in every American rifle squad in Vietnam, a single man with one of those launchers could change a fight by himself. He could reach behind cover. He could drop fire and steel and smoke onto any spot he could see and many he could only guess at. He could match the firepower of a small mortar with a weapon a man could carry on a sling and load by hand. A Viet Cong fighter who had spent his life using the cover of the rice paddies and the trilenes learned that the cover was not what it used to be. The flat rifle fire he had always been able to beat was still in the squad. But now there was something else in the squad, a single soldier with a stubby fat barrel launcher and a pouch full of grenades. And when that hollow thumb came across the field, the smart move, the move that kept you alive, was to be somewhere else when the grenade came down. The men who heard that sound and stayed where they were did not always get to hear it twice. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.